I was house-sitting for my grandma one weekend while she went to Florida with some church friends. I was sleeping in the guest bedroom next to her room. It was the same guest bedroom my brother and I used when we were kids, the one with two twin beds side by side. I chose the bed closest to the window. Before I got into bed, I did what I always do when I'm alone in someone else's house. I checked every door. The front door, the back door, everything I could think of. I wanted to be sure the locks were secure. When I finally laid down, it was still early, and I didn't fall asleep right away. There wasn't much to do at my grandma's house, so I stayed on my phone for a while, watching videos, texting people, just passing time. That's when I started to hear a voice outside. At first, I wasn't sure if it was real, but after a few seconds, it became clear. It sounded like a woman's voice, coming from the front of the house, repeating one word. "Hello?" Then silence. About 10 seconds later, again. "Hello." She kept doing it, over and over like it was on a loop. I got out of bed and stepped into the hallway, moving slowly because I was trying to listen without making noise. The closer I got to the front door, the clearer it became. The voice was coming from the porch. The problem was, my grandma's front door doesn't have a peephole, but the dining room windows give a clear view of the front porch. So I crept over and tried to peek through the plastic blinds without making it obvious. Apparently, I didn't do a good job. Because when I looked out, I saw a woman standing on my grandma's stoop, and she was already looking straight at me, like she knew exactly where I would be peeking from. She smiled, and then she said it again, in the same calm tone. "Hello?" She was older, maybe late 50s, early 60s, but don't picture a sweet, harmless old lady. Something about her face unsettled me. I can't even explain it properly. It was just wrong. The kind of expression that makes you feel uneasy instantly. I stepped away from the window, trying to rationalize it. Maybe she was one of my grandma's friends. But it was midnight. Why would anyone show up at midnight? And if she needed something, why wouldn't she knock? Why wouldn't she ring the bell? Why would she just stand there repeating "hello" like that? I felt genuinely unsettled, so I went back to the guest bedroom and shut the door. With the door closed, I couldn't hear her anymore. I told myself maybe she left. I started texting people right away, my sisters, my friends, telling them how bizarre it was. My sisters kept telling me to call my grandma, but there was no point. She was probably asleep, and even if she wasn't, she barely ever checked her phone. Time passed. The house was quiet again. And slowly, I started to calm down, thinking maybe it was over. Then the silence broke. There was a very loud sound against the window, more than a knock, more like someone striking it hard with their hand. My chest tightened instantly as my body kicked into that fight or flight feeling. A moment later, the noise stopped. And then I heard that familiar voice again, closer than before. "Hello." I don't know if it was adrenaline or frustration, but I suddenly felt brave enough to check. I grabbed the blinds and lifted them, and there she was, right on the other side of the glass. Her face was close enough that it felt like she was invading the room, even though the window was between us. She was still smiling, wide and unnatural, like she was enjoying my reaction. I shouted, "I'm calling the cops!" Her expression didn't change. I dropped the blinds and ran out into the living room, looking around the house, scanning doors and windows like I expected her to appear inside. Then I ran upstairs and locked myself into the guest bedroom. And I hate admitting this, but I didn't actually call the police. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to feel dramatic. Maybe I froze. Maybe I thought it would stop if I just waited. So I waited. I crawled into bed and pulled the covers over myself. I stayed awake for hours, listening to every little sound in the house. Eventually, when enough time had passed, I went downstairs and checked each window. The woman was gone. The next morning, I called my grandma and told her what happened. And the moment I explained it, she started yelling into the phone. She sounded panicked and genuinely distressed. She told me that a few days earlier at the grocery store, she'd noticed a woman watching her, someone about 10 years younger than her, just staring and smiling for no reason. I tried to calm her down. I wasn't sure if the two things were connected, but after we hung up, I couldn't stop thinking about it. My grandma is 75, and she's lost some of her sharpness, so sometimes I have to take what she says with caution. But the fear in her voice that morning gave me chills. And to this day, I still wonder if it could have been the same person. My name is Nicholas, and at the time this happened, I was a freshman at Syracuse University, an area that isn't exactly known for being the safest. I had just gone through a breakup with my first girlfriend, and I did what a lot of people do after something like that. I tried to move on by getting back into online dating. I downloaded Hinge, and after a while, I matched with a blonde girl named Stephanie. We actually clicked fast. She said she went to Syracuse too. We both liked reading, going to the movies, and we even had the same sense of humor. It felt easy talking to her, like it wasn't forced. After a few days of messaging, I suggested we go on a movie date. She said she'd love to. Then she told me to meet her at a specific spot near campus, and she would pick me up. So around 9 p.m., I went to the location and waited on the corner of a normal neighborhood street. Everything looked ordinary. Quiet block, nothing suspicious. Just me, standing there, checking my phone. Stephanie messaged me and asked me to share my location with her. I did. A few minutes later, a car turned onto the street and started approaching me. It slowed down and stopped right in front of where I was standing. The driver rolled down the window. It wasn't Stephanie. It was an older man. He asked me what I was doing out there alone, which already felt weird. I told him I was waiting for someone. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. He asked, "Are you waiting for Stephanie?" I froze for a second and said, "Yeah. How do you know that?" He told me he was Stephanie's father, and then he said casually, like this was normal, "Hop in, I'll take you to her." I took a good look at him, and honestly, he looked a little too old to be her father. But even more than that, something about him felt off. His tone didn't feel protective. It felt calculated, like he was testing whether I'd cooperate. I'm not an idiot when it comes to sketchy situations. So I kept my voice firm and said, "Why didn't Stephanie tell me you'd be picking me up?" He claimed he didn't trust some random guy meeting up with his daughter and wanted to meet me first. I stared at him for another second, letting the silence stretch. And then I didn't argue. I didn't ask more questions. I just turned around and started walking away in the opposite direction from where his car was facing. Behind me, he started yelling, "Hey, hey!" like he was genuinely surprised I wasn't going along with it. I kept walking. I heard his car start moving again, and I turned my head, half expecting him to make a U-turn and follow me. But he drove straight and turned left out of sight. For a moment, I felt relief. I continued down the block toward campus. I reached the corner and was about to turn when I noticed a car parked on the side of the road. Its lights were off, and I was almost sure it was the same car. As I passed, I tried to glance into the window, but the glass was tinted. I kept my face neutral and kept walking, trying not to make it obvious I was suspicious. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Stephanie's account. It said, "Why didn't you get in the car with my dad?" That was the moment it stopped feeling like a misunderstanding. I didn't respond. I just kept walking, and I kept checking behind me to see if the car would move. When I reached an intersection, I turned right. And then I started running, straight toward campus, as fast as I could. I expected the car to follow me. It didn't. I made it back to campus out of breath. I tried to slow down and act normal, but my heart was still pounding. I started walking toward my dorm building, telling myself maybe I was being paranoid. Then I heard footsteps behind me. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just another student walking the same direction, but then I heard a very distinct sound, like someone's shoe had kicked a piece of broken glass on the ground. And something about that sound made me instantly sure I wasn't alone. I ducked behind a van and stopped just to listen. The footsteps were still there, a few cars away, and then I saw him, that older man. He was approaching from between two parked cars, coming directly toward me. He yelled something I couldn't fully understand, but it sounded like, "Come back, and I'll take you to her." He looked like he had to be in his 60s. There was no way he'd catch me if I sprinted. So I ran. I took off as fast as I could and didn't stop until I was back inside my dorm building. I got to my room and locked the door behind me. My roommate wasn't there, so I had nobody to talk to. I just sat there trying to calm down, trying to make sense of what had almost happened. Then my phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from the same number. And what it said made my blood go cold. It said, "You're lucky you got away. I would have strangled you." I still have the screenshot. I replied, "Thanks for the threat. It's going straight to the police." Then I blocked the number. I saved the entire conversation as evidence, and I planned to go to the police with it, because whoever that man was, I knew one thing for sure. That wasn't his first time trying that. And if I had gotten into that car, there's a good chance I wouldn't have made it back. When I was 18, I had a side job as a part-time janitor at my high school. During the summer, I worked whatever shifts I could get, sometimes during the day, sometimes at night, anywhere from 9 a.m. to midnight, depending on how much money I needed. A lot of the time, the older janitors would leave before me, and I'd be the one locking up the building. This was before the school had security cameras in every hallway, so being alone in that building at night felt strange sometimes. But honestly, I didn't mind it. I actually liked it. When I was left alone, I could usually finish about half an hour of real work, then spend the rest of the shift on my phone, or even leave early and still get paid for the full time. I'll admit it, I pushed my luck more than I should have. One night, my supervisor, Tom, had to leave early. That meant I'd be finishing the rest of the shift completely alone, and I'd be locking up the entire school by myself. Before he left, like always, Tom told me to text him if I needed anything. Then he headed out. Right before he went, he gave me one last task. Take all the extra chairs from the gymnasium, left over from an assembly, and bring them down to the basement storage room. I figured I'd knock that out quickly, then go home. I grabbed a stack of 6 chairs and started carrying them down to the basement. Down there, the lighting was terrible. The storage room lights were dim and uneven, and the whole basement didn't feel like part of a normal school. It felt more like a warehouse basement, cold, ugly, and forgotten. As I walked into the storage room, I noticed something that immediately made the place feel even creepier. There were a bunch of art mannequins lined up in the room, and most of them were covered with large paint cloths, the kind that hang like blankets. It looked like the art department stored supplies down there. I dropped the first stack of chairs where the rest were stored and went back upstairs to the gym to grab more. When I came back down with another stack, I froze. One of the mannequins was uncovered. The cloth that had been covering it was gone. And I knew for a fact it had been covered just minutes earlier because it was one of the ones closest to the front, the kind you can't miss when you walk in. I didn't try to convince myself it was nothing. I immediately pulled out my phone and texted Tom. "I think someone's down in the basement," he replied. "What do you mean?" I said. "One of the art cloths was moved." It took him a minute to respond, and when he did, he said, "No one else should be there." That's when I noticed something else. In the corner of the storage room, outside the small circle of light in the center, there was a cloth tucked low against the floor. It wasn't draped over a mannequin, it was covering something smaller, like it was hiding a shape. I stared at it for a second, trying to decide if I was imagining things. Then I started tiptoeing toward it, and when I got a few feet away, I saw it clearly. Whatever was under that cloth moved, not a lot. Just a subtle shift, like someone trying to stay perfectly still but failing. There was no doubt anymore. Someone was hiding under it. I turned and ran upstairs as fast as I could, slammed the basement door shut and locked it. My hands were shaking while I texted Tom again. "Someone is hiding under a cloth in the basement." Tom texted back, "Call the cops." But I didn't want to be alone dealing with that. I told him to come back because he had only left about 10 minutes earlier. He refused. Instead, he told me to handle it. He told me to be a man and confront whoever was down there. I stood there for a moment, staring at the locked door, trying to decide what to do. And against my better judgment, I went back down. When I opened the basement door and stepped into the storage room again, the cloth in the corner was no longer propped up. It was lying flat on the floor, and whoever had been under it was gone. My stomach dropped, because that meant one thing. If they weren't under the cloth anymore, then they were somewhere else in that basement. I stood there, frozen, listening. And that's when I heard a very heavy metallic noise from above me, like something shifting and striking metal. I slowly looked up. Above my head were large air vents, and I watched the metal begin to bend inward in small dents, one after another, moving across the vent like something was crawling inside it. Then it stopped, directly above me, and the vent began to shake with repeated impacts, like whoever was inside was trying to force it open from the inside. In that moment, I didn't care what Tom said. I didn't care about finishing the shift. I didn't care about being tough. I was done. I ran upstairs, locked up the school as fast as I could, and went straight home. The next day, I told Tom only part of the truth. I said I thought I saw someone in the corner, but when I checked again, they were gone. I said I didn't find anything else. I left out the moving cloth. I left out the vents. It was my last week at that job anyway, and I didn't want to know what would have happened if I had stayed down there any longer.